This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Always a creative with a story in mind. What happens when you sit down and you decide to put pen to paper? You come up with a fantasy novel that will stand the test of time. Join me as I talk to fantasy author Lauren M Leasure on this episode of True Crime and Authors.
Welcome to True Crime and Authors Podcast, where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction. Here's your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Crime and Authors. Of course, I am your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure that you are following us on all of our social media outlets. All of that can be found in the show notes of this episode. Well, if you've been paying attention to the episode list and looking at the calendar, you know today I interview another fabulous author. Let me tell you a little bit about who we have today. She is a native of Maine, and she now calls Florida her home. She is a lover of all things fantasy and magic, and when she's not writing, she's spending time with her husband and two pups, Sadie and Sport, and her awesome husband, Steven. She is the author of The Sin of Saints, the Benevolence and Blood series. Please welcome to the show, Lauren M Leasure. Lauren, welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you for coming. It's an awesome opportunity to get to talk to you, and I'm glad that we finally get this chance to speak.
Yeah.
So, Sins of Saints, this is your very first book that you've ever written.
It is. Yeah, it is. So it's crazy. Yeah. I don't know really where it came from. It kind of just popped up all of a sudden, the idea, and then there it went.
I noticed that you had a quote on your website. I want to read a little bit because it says, "I didn't necessarily set out to write a book. A rough idea came to me in one day and I just kind of started. That rough idea led me to a world of my own creation, one I can see so vividly and I have a hard time believing it doesn't exist." And so out of that came The Sin of Saints. Did you intend, if you thought about writing a book before, did you intend to go down the fantasy lane, or is that just something that you just fell into?
So I've always really liked to write since I was a kid. And I never really even considered writing a book. I just always liked to write. I would do poetry and, anytime there was like a short story contest, I would do that kind of stuff. And I just like to do anything creative in general. And then when it came to school and, going to college and everything, I found myself oftentimes proofreading and editing my friends' their papers and everything. And I genuinely enjoyed it. And I never really, thought that I would write a book until I kind of just did it. And when it comes to fantasy, I've always really liked fantasy, not so much even reading it until recently. But, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, love Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. So I kind of fell into reading the fantasy genre last year with one of my best friends, Ashley. She and I came across A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is, the big kind of, it's like the chick flick of the fantasy world. Since then it's kind of been almost all I've read, and then I just started writing. So I wish I had a cooler story.
So, it's kind of fascinating you bring up Lord of the Rings, because when you read this book, I kind of do get Lord of the Ring vibes, just how everything is set up, how everything is flowing, the plot line, especially when it comes to Petra and all the things that she endures throughout the book, which brings me to when you thought about the book and the main characters, what was the main concept that you came up with when you created Petra?
One of, the main things that I had in my mind when I started writing, and I started thinking, okay, what have I read and what elements have I not seen? And that's kind of how I came up with the concept of there being drugs involved, because I don't really see a lot of that in any, fantasy. And so that was kind of really the only thing that I knew I wanted. When it comes to Petra and really developing her character and putting her on this terrible journey that she goes through, I kind of let her almost tell me what she wanted to be. I didn't really I didn't storyboard her. I didn't even really have, I want her to be this, and this. I kind of just started writing and let it write itself. And Petra kind of, her personality kind of started to come out more and more as I wrote. And yeah, that's kind of how Petra was born.
So a lot of the authors I've spoken to, they've told me that some of their main characters has lived in their brain for a number of years. One author told me 11 years before it actually came out on paper. Is that the same with you with Petra? Maybe she lived inside of your brain for a while, you just didn't know it, or did you always know she was there?
Yes and no. I mean, I like the idea of I didn't know that she was there because there was one thing, I actually made an Instagram post about the Enneagram types of all of the characters. And I realized that Petra and I have the same Enneagram type. I was like, I wonder if that's some subconscious thing. So I think I would like to think of Petra as almost like kind of an extension of myself in that she is a lot looser with her language than I am in real life. And so in a way, that's a way that I guess I express myself through Petra. So I don't know if a concrete idea of her was in my brain necessarily. Obviously she was in there somewhere, but I think, like I said, just kind of developed as she was written.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that her language is a lot looser than what yours is, because I don't know if anybody else does this, but when you look at an author and then you read a book, you look at the person like, did she really write that? Because your picture she don't even look like she would say these things in real life. I know from being a World Wrestling Federation fan, or entertainment now, they say that the character is the extension of the actual real person. So does Petra live a little bit in you somewhere to bring these things out that you don't normally do in real life?
100%, yes. So I would like to think that with all of the terrible things that Petra goes through, she kind of reacts the way that I would think that I would react. But yeah, a lot of when I'm with my friends, I will say that Petra's language is, I guess, a reflection of myself, when I'm with my friends. But otherwise, on social media and stuff, it's a little bit different now with the Sin of Saints promotions, but on social media and in school, I was always very proper and the good girl. I never really was the one who had this crazy, foul mouth. And so I definitely think that letting Petra speak like that was almost therapeutic for me. So yeah.
Well, that brings to my next question. Was there any real life experiences at all that you kind of intertwined into the Sin of Saints?
So yes and no. I think even the more that I go back and think about it or read it, I think that there was definitely some subconscious stuff. There wasn't necessarily anything in my life that I was that would be good. Some of the character traits, there are, obviously I won't give anything away, but, narcissistic character traits, Rena, who turns out to be, her good friend. And same with even Marita and Celise. I have kind of pulled traits from people that I know, good traits and everything when it comes to creating them. I know a lot of times people say you should write this person into your book and you should kill them off, or you should, do this or that. I do have one person that I wrote into the book. His name was Ethan, and he was based on somebody who, burned my friend pretty badly. And so he was the one character that I pulled from real life. But when it comes to, and kill them off, so I guess don't make me angry because I'll put you in my book. But yeah, no, when it comes to the events and stuff, nothing, I genuinely don't know where it came from. I wish I could be all this bad stuff happened to me and it was therapeutic, but no.
So for this is to come from pure imagination is real in depth. The one thing that you did, which again reminds me of Lord of the Rings, is you have a lot of unique characters and a lot of unique lands. And then if anybody checks out your website, that'd be in the show notes here, you actually have a whole entire map pointing out different things, even down to how you're supposed to pronounce all of the names.
Yes.
How did you come up with such unique characters and lands?
Again, I guess I don't really even know. I just really let the story write itself. But when it came down to, I knew that I wanted it to be its own world. I knew I didn't want it to, take place on Earth or wherever, or in this realm that we're in. And I think that a lot of that comes down to the fact that, I love the fantasy genre, and I love, reading books that have their own maps and have these characters and have these dynamics that we don't necessarily see in real life. I wish I had like a cool, I pulled it from this cool part of my mind, but I guess just wanted to create my own world. Like who doesn't want to do that? And for some reason with this, it just worked.
Well, I will be the first to say, because I think I may have shared with you, I wasn't a fantasy reader. I wasn't a big fantasy fan. Every time I seen a fantasy book, I passed it over. When I got into Katie and Bray's, I got into that group, and I'm in another group called Cat's Book Nerds. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to expand my reading. I used to only read autobiographies and true crime. So I'm like, well, let me see, what's out there. Because my oldest daughter, Geneva's like, well, there's some books that's written as fantasy that actually reads like it's a real life story. You might enjoy them. So when I ran across Joe's book and there was a tour for him, like, the cover looked cool. So that's what grabbed me. I'm like, all right, this cover looks pretty cool. So I read about the synopsis. I'm like, let's give it a shot. And I'm glad that I did. It's actually a very good book. It did read to me like it's something that could happen in real life. The only thing that kind of drew you away from that was because you would know that the name of the lands and things like that was not real because you can't look them up on a map. But besides that, everything to me, it kept me enthralled through the whole entire book.
And that's what I was really hoping to get. And fantasy can be so difficult. And that's why so many fantasy books are like bricks. They're huge because if a book takes place in New York City, you don't necessarily have to spend 3 chapters explaining what New York City is, because you can either one, look it up, or you two already know enough about New York City to put 2 and 2 together. When it comes to, building a whole new land, so much of it has to be explained. And so that was one challenge with the book, was I wanted it to be intertwined with the story. I didn't necessarily want to be sitting here saying, okay, this city is near this city, and this, I wanted it to come out very naturally through, dialogue and her thoughts and all that.
Going forward then, because according to my Kindle, I believe it told me that The Sin of Saints is about a 15-hour read. Yeah, you had to explain everything. Are you going to use the same lands going forward as you write the series? And if you do, is that going to shorten the length of the book so you don't have to really explain as much as how the cities and stuff works?
So it'll be in the same world, same lands and everything. There will be, the next book it'll expand out more to some of the cities that were mentioned, as well as, cities that are going to be kind of new in the second and third books. I don't necessarily want it to be shorter. And I think that it'll actually leave me more room for the actual story, since I don't have to explain as much. Obviously there's going to be some things that need to be explained further, but I think it'll be much more story heavy than setting up the actual world. So in terms of world building, I won't have to do as much.
I think 15 hours is a good pace for a book that's this enthralled. Also, the chapters are not super long. I've read books before where the first chapter out of the gate is like an hour and a half long. Sometimes that become monotonous, because if you don't have a full hour and a half to read that, you're splitting that chapter up, and now it sticks in your mind. Well, I can't finish it until then. So I think the book is very good pace. It's proper length. It leaves you off right where you want it to, right? So it leaves you at a point to where you have to check out book number 2 because you're just left on that cliff. But looking at some of the other stuff you do, so written this book, it's a series, but according to what I've read, it says that you are also a serial creative.
Yes.
And you have 12 different hobbies at this time.
Yes.
How do you keep up with that and writing your books?
I don't sleep much, and not because I, don't have the time to sleep. I don't sleep a lot, and I'm a multitasker. I have, a whole shelving area just dedicated to every creative hobby I've ever gone through. My joke right now is that I'm like, okay, well, I wrote a book, so now I think I want to learn how to play the bagpipes. I'm not actually going to do it because bagpipes are very expensive. I looked it up. There's at any given time, I feel like I'm doing 3 things at once. I actually graduate this coming Saturday from with my master's from grad school at Penn State. That'll free up more time for me to do random things. Yeah, I mean, I like to knit. I like to, I'm into videography. I just, all sorts of random stuff. So I feel like, you know, in my family and friend group, they were like, well, it was only a matter of time before you wrote a book because you do everything else. So yeah, I always have to be doing something.
You sound kind of like me. Yeah. I mean, I do this one. I do another podcast. I'm a drummer. So I'm doing drum videos all the time. So it's like, I understand where you're coming from. A lot of people don't understand the creative mind. It flows from one thing to the next.
Yes.
It's almost like a challenge, right? So
Yes.
even things you didn't set out to do, like you didn't set out to write a book, but then all of a sudden you write a book and you're like, okay, well, I've done that.
Exactly.
What else can I do and accomplish?
Exactly.
So I totally know where you're coming from. If you don't mind, I think I have a few questions here from your fans and readers out there.
Sure.
So let's tackle those. So one of the questions is, when is book 2 going to be released?
So here's the thing is this is the other thing that I feel like with a lot of creative people, if I put a date on it, I will not start until 3 weeks before, which is not happening because I'm already working on book 2. My goal is end of this year, beginning of next year. A lot of it depends on my editor. My editor is amazing. Her name is Joyce, but she's going for her doctoral. So a lot of it will depend on her and her schedule and everything. And I do, you know, I want it to be perfect. So end of this year, beginning of next year is what I'm shooting for. But yeah, I don't necessarily have a set date.
So my own question on top of that, now, if you don't have to answer if you don't want to, do you know how many books will be in the series?
So I'm not sure if it's going to be a trilogy or 4 books. I don't know if there's a word for a 4-book series. It's just a 4-book series.
4-book series.
Yeah. We were trying to think about like, is that, you know, trilogy, whatever. So it's going to depend a lot on what happens in book 2 and book 3. If I can wrap it up nicely, I'll do 3. If I feel like, you know what, I need one final punch, I'll do 4 books. And I do have room for a prequel, which I'm very excited about. I have no idea when that will happen, but I have a lot of ideas in my head for that.
I think this question's already been answered, but I didn't see that it was here. But I'll ask it again. Were any characters based on people that you knew? Yeah,
so I had the one person. And other than that, you know, certain traits. I will say though, and I put it in the acknowledgments. I know not everybody reads the acknowledgments. I was like, I thanked my family and I was like, no conscious decisions were made to include traits. Yeah, I didn't want my mom to read it and say, my mom's not the best in the book. Where did you get this from? So yeah, I don't want anybody to run with that except for Ethan.
So just to let you know, maybe people think it's weird. I do read the acknowledgments.
Oh, that's awesome.
I read them because, well, you get to know a little bit more about the author, right? Who helped on the book, you know, who they wanted to thank, what they went through usually goes into the acknowledgments. So I do actually read those. So you're not writing those in vain.
Oh, that's awesome.
Another question is, will there be new characters in book 2?
So yes, I'm very, very, very excited. I have a few characters that I'm working on. One is going to be this really cool, badass girl who's going to be, you know, basically befriend Petra. This girl has another friend and he's a really cool guy. He's awesome. And then there are going to be I'm trying to think of how to say it without spoiling it. There are going to be some like military generals, lieutenants, commanders, that kind of stuff who are also going to be really cool. She's going to have a lot less of a hard time in this one. It's not going to be easy, but she's not going to get burned by as you know, as many people.
Well, that's always good.
Yeah.
Who would you cast as Petra if The Sin of Saints was a movie?
So the only person I've ever been able to find that's like partially like Petra in my head is Josephine Langford. I don't know anything about her other than what she looks like. I know she's in some things. I just don't know what. But the thing with Petra in my head is she's not perfect. How a lot of times in fantasy novels, I feel like, you know, the main character is obviously beautiful and slim and tall and blah, blah, blah. Petra is not necessarily the most beautiful. She's not graceful, that kind of stuff. So I don't really have anybody in my head other than Josephine Langford. Just looks alone. I know she's out there. If I ever see her, I'll screenshot it and post it. But yeah.
The cover of The Sin of Saints is awesome. I think it's one of the better covers that I've seen. Who designed your cover for you? And is this something that you came up with or the designer did?
So my cover designer, I would give her millions of dollars if I could. She was amazing. So her name's Ivy at Beautiful Book Covers. I actually found her on Etsy. I found I was just scrolling through, like they make pre-made covers where, they only one person can buy them and everything. And I saw this really gorgeous cover and it was like a dagger with a snake wrapped around it. I was like, oh, that is awesome. And I almost just bought that one, but because I was like, this is so cool. But my friends and family were like, you know what, you should just see if you can find some custom work. And so I reached out to her and I was like, hey, do you do custom work? This is kind of what I'm thinking. I basically said, I want filigree and I want symbolism. That's kind of it. And she said, okay. And I don't think she knew what she was signing up for when she said yes to me. She was just incredible. I mean, she wanted everything to be perfect. We exchanged hundreds of messages. And I mean, she took literally what was in my head, put it on a book, everything from the font to, I have kind of like what I wanted to be, the beasts of Onyx Pass kind of in the vines and everything with the snake. She just knocked it out of the park. So yeah, if anybody needs a book cover, Ivy at Beautiful Book Covers on Etsy, amazing.
Yeah, we definitely cannot sleep on those Etsy artists because Catch Creation 614, who's actually the official sponsor of my show, she makes custom reading journals and other kind of journals.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I found her in her journal work. I was the only guy, I think I still am, that she's created a journal for. And I came at her with all kinds of stuff. And, my latest one, I said, I want one in the Black Panther theme. And she knocked it out the park.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't think she knew what she was signing up for when she said yes. But I mean, just every little tiny thing that I thought of, she made just perfect. And I mean, even so much as, the symbolism of the colors in the background, you can kind of see, I don't know if you can even see it on here, but like, it's obviously blue, but there's undertones of green for a certain character's blue and green eyes. And then there's undertones of purple for, the leech thorn. So she just, I mean, I stare at this and I'm like, I can't believe that this is my book because, and covers, people say, oh, I don't judge a book by its cover. People totally judge a book by its cover, especially fantasy. Yeah. Etsy artists, 1000%.
All glory to her because the cover she created is what's catching a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what caught mine to even want to read the synopsis. And I know a lot of people say, well, the cover doesn't matter. It's what's in the story. And I'm like, I highly disagree because if it wasn't for that cover, I may not have even wanted to read the synopsis.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think we all appreciate a pretty book. And I wanted it to look good on the shelf. And I mean, if I saw this in a bookstore, I would pick it up. And there are books that I'm sure they're amazing. They could be the best books in the world, but if it doesn't have a good cover, I hate to say it. I think everybody's that way. I'll be the one to say it. It is very striking, and I'm still in disbelief that that's, my story.
So you are an independent author. This is something I usually ask everybody. Are you independent because of choice now? You wanted your own creative control? Or if a big book house came to you and said, hey, we really want to pick up The Sin of Saints, would you consider that?
So I initially started out submitting to agents to try to get with a traditional publisher just because I didn't know anything about self-publishing. I knew nothing about it. All I knew is I had a very preconceived idea in my head of self-published equals not good. And I think a lot of people have that, in their head. I quickly learned that, you could have the best story in the world. And if, an agent just might not pick it up, it's very, very hard. So after kind of looking more into the pros and cons, after it was 2 weeks or so that I had agent inquiries out, I pulled all my inquiries and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. Because then I did hear horror stories of contracts and, they can change your story and edit your story. And, I wanted input on the cover. So yeah, ultimately it was by choice. I think if somebody reached out now, I would definitely entertain the idea just because I would have a little bit more leverage to say, hey, I did the first one on my own. So I would like, maybe more input. I would, like to give more input than, another author would. Yeah, it was a it's a wild ride to self-publish, let me tell you. And it's not, there is not a handbook. There is not a rule book. And I don't even know if there could be, because there's so many little, parts to it. But yeah, for now, I'm self-published. I'll probably do it for the second one. If someone wants to reach out, then great. But if not, I'm doing it on my own.
So that kind of begs this question, because when I talked to Nicole Wilden, she's the author of Obedience. Her book was extremely long. And there is a lot of things that she packed into that book. She was afraid and was told that if a big publishing house actually picked her up, that they would want her to minimize that. And she wasn't willing to do that. If your big publishing house picked you up for either wanting to republish The Sin of Saints or whatever your next books are, would you be willing to compromise your content to go to a bigger house?
So I am, in general, a very meek and mild person. I will take a lot of things before I actually get angry. But I think with my book, I would be able to put my foot down and say, no, listen, this is my story. If they wanted to touch anything in The Sin of Saints, I would say, no, not with this one. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I would hope that if that did, if somebody reached out and said, we want to do the second book or the third book or whatever, I would be able to have enough leverage and say, hey, this has been very well received because of, what I did. So I would like input on this next one. But yeah, no, I don't think I would let them really change the story. And at this point I have, the story's mapped out in my head beginning to end. They'd have a hard time changing that.
I would say definitely stand your ground, because if they wanted that and they didn't want to work with you on that, they're definitely missing out, because The Sin of Saints is a great book. You're a great writer.
Well, thank you.
It's happening this way all over the industry. So I don't know if you watch a lot of Apple TV Plus, but when Apple TV Plus was first launched, all of your big producers, right, even down to Steven Spielberg, said, we want to write for this platform because we want to write movies that no one else wants to pick up. And it was crazy because Ted Lasso won Oscars, is now nominated for 14 different Emmys. Coda won Best Picture. And so you watch these shows and you're like, why wouldn't anybody pick these up? And they're saying because they wanted to tell the story the way they wanted to tell the story and not have a publishing house tell them how they could do it.
Yeah. And a lot of it does come down to with, you're sending out inquiry emails or, every once in a while there's a form that you can submit. And it says, okay, tell us what your book's about in 100 words or less. I'm like, 100 words for and all the websites say, well, if you're a good writer, you should be able to do it in 100 words. And so that's why I even say, you can have the best story in the world, but it might not get picked up because of, the email or because of your 100 words, or maybe you wrote 102 or something like that. So yeah, no, I definitely see now, and now that I'm kind of in this community and in this niche, how many amazing self-published authors there are. Just the quality of work is absolutely incredible.
Well, the thing is I couldn't even, and I'm just a reader and a fan, I couldn't describe The Sin of Saints in 100 words.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I've talked about your book before because everybody knows I'm an avid reader and they know that this podcast was coming up and they're like, so what book are you reading today? And I'm like, well, here it is. I'm reading The Sin of Saints. Well, what can you tell me about the book? And my answer always was, how long do you have? I'm like, I can't simply explain this book to you to where you get the gist of wanting to read it unless I go into a little bit of detail. So if you're looking for a few words, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, getting my synopsis down to, something that can fit on the back of a book cover because I'm one of those people where if I pick up a book, I'll read the first few lines of the synopsis. I probably won't, even if it's a book that I'm going to end up buying, I probably won't read the whole synopsis. So I'm like, okay, how can I get this down? Because there are so many different facets. And, I wish that when somebody asks, hey, what's your book about? I wish that I had a quick, something that I could say. And maybe I'll get there, but yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than 100 words.
So do we know, and are you willing to share what the name of book 2 would be?
So I have a few ideas. My big, decision that I have to make, and this is very, very serious, is do I want to follow the pattern of the blank of blank? Or do I want to kind of deviate from that? Because originally I was like, I want to keep the the sin of saints, the blank of blank. So no, I don't have anything that I can share yet, but I do have some really freaking awesome ideas that I'm very excited about. And that is something that, once that's ready, I'm very excited to release that. I think that'll be a cool day.
How does your husband feel about your book and the success that you're getting from the Sin of Saints?
So my husband and I, very opposite in the creative department. He can't draw a straight line with a ruler. He's very math oriented. He's numbers, he's concrete things. I'm like rainbows and, paint and glitter everywhere. So when I told him I was writing a book, I think it was kind of the same thing as, hey, I'm going to learn to play ukulele, or, hey, I'm going to teach myself, how to knit. He was like, okay, cool. How much is this going to cost us, basically? How many trips to the craft store is this one going to take? And so I kind of started telling him about the concept. And at first, and he's amazing. He's a very good listener, but I could tell that when I started talking more and more about it, he was like, oh, okay. And the only thing I've seen my husband read since I met him is a menu. So I asked, I love him, but it's true. And he'll agree with you. And I'm a big reader. So I asked him, I was like, hey, would you be willing to read my book? And he said, oh, of course. Now getting him to actually do it was a little bit of, a little bit longer. But when he finally picked it up and started reading it and got a few chapters in, he was like, oh, okay. And I think it's when he got to chapter 6, where readers will kind of know when they get to chapter 6, the day of Sindragala, which, readers will know. I think that's when I heard him start to swear out loud. And he was like, oh my gosh. And so and so basically he said, since that point, it doesn't ever slow down. And he finished it, and he was the reason that I even pursued, going to publish, because, it's awkward when someone, says, hey, I wrote a book. Do you want to read it? Because, if it's bad, that's awkward. You know what I'm saying? So he was really the push where he was like, I think that you have something here and you really need to do something with this. How do we make this happen? So he was, my final push to get the beta readers and move through that process. He is, every day he's amazed and I'm amazed that it's bringing in any kind of money. So I think, he's also happy about that part, that it wasn't just me sitting around in all my spare time writing a book for no reason. But he's super proud. He doesn't understand the fantasy world of things, but he's, happy to be along for the ride.
What's new, or what's next for Lauren? Now, we know you're getting ready to graduate college with a very big degree, so congratulations to that.
Thank you.
So besides writing things, what's next for you that we can look forward to coming down the line?
So, definitely, next books, I would love to expand and write, more series, more books. I would love to explore young adult, because I always love that. It's just, this actually kind of started out in my head as young adult, but then I started to swear. So I was like, I can't make this young adult. But other than that, I do still work, weirdly enough. I do marketing, and I basically run a chiropractic clinic. So other than that, just more book ventures. I'm excited to kind of have some more of my time back after I graduate. And maybe I will learn to play the bagpipes. Who knows?
So is there anything out there that you would like to say to your readers and fans as we wrap this up?
I mean, I know they're sick and tired of hearing me say this, especially if you're on my email list. Just thank you. There aren't words to explain how, one person reading my book blows my mind. And, every day I get on, it's all on Amazon, and I can see how many pages are read on Kindle Unlimited. That's completely separate from sales and stuff. And every single day I am amazed at how many people are reading The Sin of Saints all over the world. So just literally thank you. Every review, even the bad reviews, just anything that, you guys can have given to me has been more appreciated than literally anybody could know. And I could talk about this for 48 hours. But yeah, just thank you.
Well, let me say, Lauren, I am grateful that you came on the show. I hope that we've given your fans a lot more to look forward to. Like I said, The Sin of Saints, I'm not a fantasy reader, but I will read every book that comes out in this series. You have my word on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. This was so exciting. I mean, literally, like I said, anytime anybody's like, hey, I read your book. Do you want to do this? I'm like, you want me? It's like, really, me? So thank you. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, as you know, you're one of the first ones I reached out to when I started this show. So I'm happy that we finally got you here. And anytime you want to come back, feel free. Maybe when you write book 2, we can have you back. We can talk about that even some more.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. It's a date. Oh, I'm excited.
All right, Lauren. Well, we thank you for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So that was the incredible Lauren M. Leasure. Her book, The Sin of Saints. Go out, pick that up. You can find it right now on Kindle Unlimited for free if you are a Kindle Unlimited subscriber. Just go look up The Sin of Saints, the Benevolence and Blood series. She does not get paid a dime unless you are reading the book. I know a lot of my authors say they don't care about the money, but we need to support them so they can continue to write great books for us. So again, to Lauren M. Leasure, thank you for coming on the show. Always, guys, make sure you follow us on social media. Anything you want to know about Lauren will be down in the show notes. Make sure you check out her awesome website where you can learn more about The Sin of Saints. Also, join her newsletter so you know what's coming up next. As always, I thank you guys for joining us today. Always remember, this is the podcast that brings 2 passions into one, and I'll talk to you guys the next time.
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Authors. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. On Facebook at True Crime and Authors. On Twitter at Authors True. On YouTube and TikTok at True Crime and Authors. And email at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Dazzling_Ray from Fiverr. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild from Fiverr. And I'm the voice guy, your imaging guy from Fiverr. See you next time on True Crime and Authors.